Yes. Good to see you all again for another week. Good to see you too, Professor Dunn. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Ah, yes. I showed you this picture, right? All right. And I gave you the definition of a person. There she is. There's Crystal. People, person. Where am I here? All right. Individual, rational individual. That is what it is. To meet. Okay. I think this is what I ended on. Metan, to come into the presence of someone else. So, sir.
So,
How much, sir?
yeah.
Not much. Not yet. Let's see how I go. This classroom hot. Always sweating. Yeah. Anyways, may tend to come into the presence of another person. A person. That's what makes it a meeting. That it's between persons. Okay? Well, I guess animals meet too. You can use it in the general sense. But what makes it, I guess, special is when it's the meeting between persons. We have all sorts of words for that. Gatherings, councils, assemblies, convocations. Two wolves meet, they just meet. Yeah. Oh, who's that? Ms. Crawl. So if you did the reading, and I hope you did, yeah, Gamot is a meeting or an assembly. Well, actually, I'll get to the hermeneutical triangle in a minute. I hope you did from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Yes, that was not a required book for the course, yes? Just the Bible and Binz's book, yes? But you can find the Catechism online. I put a link on Canvas, right? So if you go to the link, it should take you to some church's website in Mississippi. That's also on the Vatican website, but it's terrible. I mean, you can't. It's there, but it's just like they don't tell you what the numbers are for each section, so you're flying blind. You have to keep clicking link after link after link and hope that you're getting it right, getting close to what you want. Whereas the one on, I think it's St. Charles Borromeo Parish in Picayune, Mississippi, they at least show you the numbers. So I use that one. I prefer that one. And the translation seems to be current, so that's good. Anyways, Catechism of the Catholic Church 101. Well, I guess I'll as well. Da 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 dee, da 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 da. Okay, so, here, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, but it's like a book. You have to flip through the pages, which I kind of find maddening. You can't just, skip, you know? I guess you can. Hold on a second. Maybe if I do this. Nah, well, yeah. Again, they don't give you the numbers, so you're flying blind. But whatever. It is what it is. All right, there's that. All right, so I overshot. I want 101. All righty then. And awesome. Okay, Catechism of the Catholic Church 101. Would anyone like to read that from the Catechism, please? La, da, 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 da. Let's see. Who hasn't read in a while? Trying to remember. I should make notes. If I go by my memory, I'll never remember. Okay. Ms. Snyder, have you done a reading recently?
No.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Indeed, the words of God, expressed in the words of men, are in every way like human language, just the word of the eternal Father, when he took on himself the flesh of human weakness, contained with one.
Excellent. Okay, so they're quoting, their quotation marks here, so they're quoting from something. We'll have to look down below at the footnote to see what they're quoting from. Number 63, DB 13, which means Dei Verbum. Number 13, I can't believe me. Ask you to read. Let me just check. Yes, we read the whole of, it's not a very long document, it's from the Second Vatican Council on Divine Revelation. That doesn't come until the end of the month. Ooh, right before Halloween, hopefully. Well, probably not, because I'm going so slowly. I'll try to find ways to speed it up, though. Anyways, Dei Verbum number, what did I say, 13? Okay, so they're quoting from there. Okay, God, the Scriptures are a meeting place, basically. God reveals himself. He condescends. He goes down. God's not spatial. At least in the Christian Catholic perception of God, God does not embody, he's not in space or time. So to say that God moves anywhere is, just a figure of speech, okay? Not to be taken literally. God is not like stepping down or stooping down from above, all right? Because he's everywhere, he's not bound to any place or location like we are. At least in theory. I haven't met him yet, Miss Mackerlane, but, if I meet him and, he's a dude like me, I'll be like, man, the Mormons were right. Dead on. Anyways, so it's a manner of speaking. This idea of sun katabasis, Mr. Lebedinsky, sun katabasis, condescension. We'll come to this Greek word later in the course. But it's a very, very old idea of what is God doing? He's, like you do with children. If any of you are, some of you are in the education program, and you're studying to, do primary school, right? Primary school, some of you. I don't think anyone wants to do high school. Don't blame them. I like the little buggers when they're that young and innocent, and they're cute, and they don't know it. That's just it's just fun. But on the other hand, it can drive you insane because you know so much, but obviously you can't tell them everything, right? You can't. And what you do tell them, you have to really be creative and clever in how you explain it to them, because their little minds are all developing and think differently. When we were children, how your minds thought differently. They're not hearing the words in the same way which you're speaking them, so we have to really train for that, right? Condescension. Even literally condescension is disgusting, because look at like teachers with the little kids in the kindergarten. It's like, you understand, you don't want to literally condescend. You bend down, you bend over to come, and we even speak that way, Mr. Philip. You have to come down to their level. Even if you don't physically come down to their level. It's basically, God is leveling himself for us. He knows we're not going to understand. Like on the way here, I was listening to some talk at some festival, I don't know what it was, but it was interesting to me, about quantum mechanics. Some Nobel Prize winner, British guy, then some German lady, and then some Polish philosopher dude with a really bad accent, let's just put it that way. It was hard to understand what he was saying, but he was interesting. And it was an interesting discussion. But there are a bunch of things that at the end of it, I'm like, okay, I gotta look this up, I gotta look that up, I gotta look the other, because I understood the words, but I didn't understand the concept, so I couldn't imagine what they were talking about. They were not condescending to their audience. Now, yeah, condescending can have a negative idea, Mr. Mr. Barnett, somebody who's condescending, like, deliberately, do you understand, child? Let me explain, I had this problem when I was trying to get this problem solved on, Microsoft Word, the community help, those things. Go on there and having some problem with a macro, getting some error message from Microsoft that I never got before from Word. Like, could you help me out? Could you take a look at the macro, see what I can figure out? Oh, I will if you ask nicely. What, did I ask like a jerk? I was polite, I didn't please. But you get this, condescending. The person has all the knowledge. Well, if I have to explain it to you, then I'll do so. So there's a negative, but this is not, it's not condescension in a negative way. Like God's like, oh, they're a bunch of dummies, so I have to. No. It's not that kind of condescension. It's more humility. God shows his own humility. That as God even, he knows he can't lay it all on us because we're creatures living in a certain time. We only have a certain skill set and knowledge set. So he kind of bends over to us. Why? For the same reason that you bend over to little kids in kindergarten or whatever. Not because you're being condescending in a bad way. You want them to understand. So you have to come down to their level. They can only understand so much. Now they decide to cut the lawn. All right. Oops. And you can only teach them. You can only teach them what they can accept. So yeah, when you were in high school, when you're teaching kids American history, like in 4th grade or something, 4th grade American history, like Ms. Colomine, they're teaching it about George Washington, the founding fathers and stuff. I'm imagining, I don't recall, well, I have to go way back and try to remember what I was taught, but I don't remember there being any mention of them mostly being slaveholders, owning other people, especially black people, well, only black people, right? It's not like they were owning Chinese people and other white people. Not like it was equal slavery, it was one group of people, right? Usually, I don't think they would emphasize that to a bunch of little 7 or 8 year olds, in 4th grade. They might talk about slavery in a general sense, and this is what, there were certain people against each other, certain people in our country who were not considered people, and black people, and they did this to them. I think it'd be like, Thomas Jefferson used to ship his female slaves and have children with them. And we know that because the relatives are still around with them being invested. So he raped the female slaves because it's obviously not an equal relationship. He was the master, and the female slave was a slave. And he was a real nice guy at that. I mean, he wouldn't treat his children from the slave as slaves. Like he didn't have them out working in his fields, living in poverty and stuff like that. They lived in the house with him. Because they were still his kid, Thomas Jefferson's kid, part of his slave. But they were servants. They would act as servants in the home. They didn't live as his children, right? His sons and daughters, and so his legitimate children. They served table as servants. And people would show up and be like, wow, these black children, they look very much like Thomas. He got his nose and his features, And, he wouldn't exactly admit, but once he died, they were all free, mother included. Well, that's kind of nice. After he was dead, he freed the woman that he had the children with, who was his slave. I don't think that if I were teaching 4th grade history, I'm going to lay all that on the little buggers. I don't think the little wieners could handle it. They're not going to, the idea of power in sex, and when someone has power, even if he might have loved the woman, I'm not saying he didn't even love the woman, clearly found her attractive, but still he was her master, and he was her owner. So what was she going to do? Say no? Once you get to high school, and even in high school, probably not until maybe your junior or senior, you might start encountering some of these things. Your high school history teacher might start laying some stuff on you. This is what was going on. As well as good stuff. I mean, it's not, it's just history. It's not just. But nevertheless, whatever. Condescension. Yes, in teaching you do that. You do that with children. You do that. I have to boil stuff down for you. Okay? People have to boil stuff down for me. I was telling you about those physicists I was listening to talking about quantum mechanics. Fortunately, they weren't doing a lot of that, and I was like Mr. Dumbo, like, okay, I'm going to have to look that up and that up and that up. Condescend a little bit more, please. But yeah, God does it to us. So I'm not surprised, for example, because sometimes you'll hear this, the Bible, say some folks in the Bible here, is a record of those encounters that people felt that they had with God, those meetings, those comings together. Okay? And God doesn't necessarily lay everything on the person all at once. Just like with the little kids, they can't handle it. Even though it's true, I didn't make anything up about Thomas Jefferson. I wouldn't say he was necessarily an evil man, even though I guess he did bad things. Okay, fine, yes. I'm not covering it up. Why didn't they tell us this? And it's not surprising when I read the Bible. It's like, well, why isn't that in the Bible? Or why didn't God tell them this? Why didn't he tell them Adam and Eve about the dinosaurs? What's God hiding? Why didn't he tell them, getting back to my slavery example, why didn't he tell them that slavery was wrong? That people shouldn't be owning other people? Or that women had equal dignity because they came from God, and therefore that means that they don't have to work in the kitchen for the rest of their life, pumping out children for a hubby or something. They can have their own lives if they want and stuff like that. And they're still good people, I guess. They're still human persons or human beings. They're not deformed men in some sense, or lesser men, males. All right, okay, fine. I'll Lebedinsky when I go the way to the great Indian buffet up in the sky, and I meet the Lord, and I can ask him some of these things. I'll put God on the griddle. Why didn't you? I don't know. What things doesn't he tell us? Hasn't he told us? Because we can't handle it. Not yet. Not yet. It takes time for us to grow up sometimes, just like little children. So I'm not surprised that, I don't look even when I'm looking at sacred writings, any sacred writings, I'm mentioning the Bible, but, the same thing with other sacred writings. You can take any sacred writing from humanity and pick it out and pick it apart and say, well, why didn't the gods know this? Why didn't they say this and stuff like that? Well, if you're a believer, and you believe God is a good educator, and he's lowering himself, he's putting himself on the level of the people, he can say as much as he can, but he's not going to tell them about the atom bomb yet, or computers, you really got to beware of online predators. Some tribesmen in Australia, hey, I got to tell you about online scams, my friend. Like, huh? What? It's not a meeting amongst equals. So God is lowering himself to us. Okay? God expresses himself in ways that we can understand. Maybe not the best ways, because human language is not always the best. Human language is never perfect. All right? It constantly develops as well, and words change meaning, and perceptions of things change meaning. I mentioned this before about classical Arabic, right, in the Quran. Some religions, like in Islam, because the Quran comes from God and was written by God himself, the Arabic, which is a human language, but for some reason it's not a human language when it's the Quran. But, you just have to kind of get into that mindset. It has to be perfect. It is perfect. Because it's divine. It comes from God. But from a Christian perspective, at least from a Christian perspective, you find the same kind of idea in other religions. Like in Judaism, the Torah in Hebrew was given perfectly to Moses. So even mistakes in the Torah, like misspellings, where biblical scholars look and they're like, oh, the text has been clearly corrupted here in transmission. They misspelled or they misinterpreted this word, Or the word looks the same. It should be pronounced this way, but it's spelled, anyways. Yeah, the rabbis would say, well, even the mistakes are from God. God's trying to tell us something, even the mistakes that are in the text. In the loopholes, baby. He's giving us a loophole or something. But from a Christian or Catholic perspective, no. I think one thing I like about Christianity, at least Catholicism, the ancient Christian churches, Protestantism is a little bit different. It's a lot different, I should say. It allows for that human element. God has to use words and concepts that people would understand at the time that he was revealing to them. Okay? So yeah, this book is here now in my hand, but some of the texts in this book are telling stories at least, that are many thousands of years old from very different cultures. And it wasn't directed towards Matthew Dunn, okay, from Sparta, New Jersey. It was directed towards the person that God wanted to be in that relationship, to have that encounter with. So I have to now understand how the person was understanding the encounter. Okay? The ultimate encounter is in Jesus, the Word made flesh. The Word. This is a metaphor that's used to describe Jesus. Very important metaphor. So Jesus is even described as a word. He is God's speech, that God speaks. And this Word takes on human flesh to now physically show. Now you can have physically an encounter with God, not just a spiritual encounter. Right? So it's not an encounter amongst equals. God is the one lowering himself. But then he's trying to lift the reader, the human, up. Okay? Scholars divide, or now we get to our triangle. Scholars divide up the relationship, the encounter that happens in a work between three things that they call the hermeneutical or rhetorical triangle. We'll learn what the word hermeneutical means later. It just means to find something, to locate. So not to find. It means to interpret, interpretation. That's what hermeneuo means in Greek, to interpret something. So the interpretive, you could say, the interpretive triangle. Rhetorical comes from the word for, in Greek, for word. Word. Rheo, I forget what I'd have to look it up. But anyways, but it's based on the Greek word for word, to speak a word. So also, the rhetorical triangle. The words of the author, which are made into a text, the words of the text, but then the words that are read by the reader. And each point of the triangle is doing something here. You have the origin, which is called the ethos, which is the writer, and the believability or the credibility of the author or the writer. You trust the author who's telling you these things. Not factually, because, if it's a fictional story, then, you understand that it's not fictional, but you're trusting the author when he says to you, this never happened, this just came out of my mind, right? This came out of my imagination. Or if it's a nonfiction book, you're trusting the author when he or she's like, no, these are facts, I've got through interviews, my own research. You're trusting that person. You're taking them as credible that what they're saying is true. Now, the Greek word ethos, or means, doesn't it mean race? Like a race or a nation or something like that, a people. Let me put in my notes why it's called ethos. I should have looked that up. Well, because the author is a person, I think, is why it's called ethos. But just know that, okay? Because if I show it to you on a quiz or something, I think we have a quiz on Friday, starting Friday. This will probably show up on it. Well, might show up on it. And just know that, the ethos, the person of the author. The text is logos, or word. The word logos means word, or the word logos means word in Greek. Okay? Another word for word. So the text is the word, and then the reader is the pathos, and pathos means like feeling, emotion. So I guess the reason they use that Greek word there is that it's in the reader that the connection is being made. The text creates a pathos, a feeling from the text. And you see their values, beliefs, the audience. Okay, you're considering who's reading what you're saying. All right. Yeah, maybe I mentioned this already, but I'll mention it again. Did I mention where the red fern grows? This Tran? Did I ever mention where the red fern grows? Did I mention it as an example? Yeah.
Question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I missed it.
Where are we?
At the top.
Logos?
No.
Hermeneutical?
Yeah.
To interpret. So interpretive. The interpretive triangle. How we interpret a text or a writing. Okay, you have the interpretation of the author, the reasons that he or she might have for writing something, originating something. You have the text itself, which just stands separately from the author after it's been written. But then you have the reader come along, and the reader has to then interpret, hermeneutics, interpret the text, and hopefully interpret what the author was in the author's mind, but you only really have it through the medium of the text. Unless, of course, you could interview the author directly. But usually you only have the book in front of you. And so you believe the author, so the author has credibility. And the text, God bless you, reason, I guess when I put reason here is another way people describe it, is because, the text means something, it has meaning, so we're using our reason, and then it creates, values and beliefs, but feelings, a pathos, a connection, an encounter with, I guess ultimately with the author. Now, back to the red fern grows, the cedar. Did I mention the red fern grows before? The book The Red Fern, did you read The Red Fern Grows? Anyone read it in school? Or, no? Here in college? No? Thought I mentioned it before. Mr. McMaster, you remember? No? The Aversa? Has anyone read the book? Has anyone read the book? Because they made a movie off of it, Mr. Barnett. Anyways, I didn't read it in high school. I won't tell you the title. Well, when I think of the title, Where the Red Fern Grows. And I forget the whole story now, but I remember the ending. Man, it was a good story. It was about a kid and his dog. I remember that. But and their journeys and things that they were going through. But I don't remember the actual story now. But I do remember the ending. Because the ending, this speak of pathos and feeling. And an encounter, really created an encounter for Even though I knew the story wasn't true, because the ending was so sad. I remember I was on my brother's bed when I finished reading. I just was bawling, crying like a baby over the ending. Where the red fern grows. The title gives away the ending, but I'm not going to tell you what happens. But you have to read the book. Oh, man. Now that's an encounter. With an author. An author I didn't know. With a fake story. It was fictional. The book's fictional. Okay? But it created a pathos. It created a feeling. Anyone read Cannery Row? Ever have to read Cannery Row? Another classic? I say it's a classic. We read that in high school as well. I remember, it was about, just about, a bunch of derelicts and, some guy, I think he was a doctor who had a clinic in California near the ocean where he took care of derelicts and homeless people and stuff like that. And there was one guy, one character who was a real jerk. He messed up. He got into his clinic and messed everything up and got drunk or something. And eventually a little guy who was the doctor found out about it, found out who did it, and they had a big fight, punched him in the face. I still remember reading the book and I was like, that's what I'm waiting for, baby. I want to punch him in the face, I was angry. I hated this guy for what he did, this homeless guy, because the doctor treated him so nicely and he repaid him by basically trashing his clinic. It was a character. Existed in the author's mind. Cannery Row. But it made me angry. Ooh. I'm talking about books here, but movies, yes. Especially the visual. Maybe not so much books with people. Most of you people, I would imagine, is more visual than what you're streaming and stuff. It's all scripted. The characters don't really exist. The actors and actresses kind of exist. Although I mentioned this in the last one. Remember when I was talking about AI? The future of AI and why you pay? Oh yeah, Emily Blunt. That's what I already mentioned. Emily Blunt. And using AI actresses and actors, because you don't have to pay them. So they're not real. They're not real. Everything's scripted. You know that. The language is scripted. Okay? Even where people are supposed to be on camera, where they have to move, it's all, you can't see it, but it's all taped out on the floor where you have to be to get a camera shot. It doesn't just happen. And what's going on? And that's why you have to be careful, because you can think that the stuff is, you can start thinking the stuff is like real, like this, like you see stuff going on and like this is really happening in the world. It's a movie. It's a movie, okay? It can be manipulative. It can try to make you think the way the director wants you to think, or the way the scriptwriter gives you their values. But it's creating an encounter. There's a meeting there, and it can create pathos or emotions in you, either of anger, So I guess because it's in the news right now, you turn on like Law and Order episodes and I should say everything, but you have all these episodes about, immigration agents going out and smashing down doors. Because of course that's what's happening, right? They're kidnapping people. They're smashing down doors and clubbing people over the head because it shows it on Law and Order. And it makes me angry. Should be angry. People shouldn't be doing that to other people. And treating people with justice, like human beings. Yeah, it makes me angry. Pathos. Well, that's what they want, I think. Trying to create that encounter. Emotional encounter. Make a response. Okay? But I also have my role to play. See, I have my role to play as the reader because I also bring my background as well. So when I'm reading the book, I can start interpreting it in ways that maybe the author never thought of. This especially happens, I think, when we talk about religious writings. You know? We might be able to establish what a text originally meant. Okay, this is what, I don't know, the book of Exodus really means in this verse, okay? But, you know, maybe that's not how it's been interpreted all throughout the history of interpretation. People have gotten it wrong. Well, maybe not wrong, I should say. But they've brought their hopes to maybe the text, or what they want the text to say to them. And so that's why, you know, for example, if you go to well, we have it here. We don't really have any Bible classes, but if you go to like some state schools, they might have a biblical studies person, or religious studies, I should say, religious studies person who teaches the Bible and stuff like that. And, you know, that could be shocking for some people, because it's kind of like, you know, you get in, especially a lot of like maybe Christian kids will come into the class, or Jewish kids, and they find out, you know, what their rabbis and their parsons and their priests told. Well, forget about the priests, because that's but their pastors, you know, have told them all along that they've learned about the Bible, you know. And now you've got someone with a PhD who's not looking at it from a religious perspective, is looking at it purely from an historical perspective or scientific perspective, and it's giving you consensus scholarship and stuff like that. And it's creating a different type of encounter with this book than the person had before. They didn't see it that way. They were reading it from what they needed, maybe salvation, to feel clean, to feel loved. You know, I'm having a bad day, so I have to get into the Word, right? You know, get out my Bible and read that God loves me, you know, go to my go-to passages, you know, stuff like that. They weren't reading it from a perspective of, say, a religious studies scholar who's like, not assuming that God exists, just reading it as any kind of literary text and trying to extrapolate, you know, did this happen? Did this not happen? Did the author mean this? Did the author mean that? You know, different kind of encounter, and it can create an emotion. You can also take away the emotion. But a person, sometimes people can't integrate that with what they were told to feel. They lose their faith, you know. Can't feel about the Bible the way I felt before, because I know what Jeremiah really means here. He's not talking to me. You know, or he's not talking, Isaiah isn't predicting that a virgin will give birth to Jesus, you know. So I can't read the text. I can't have the same emotional response, the same encounter with the text anymore, because I know too much or know different stuff. Okay, well, that doesn't mean can't have the same encounter. I mean, you're not going to have the same encounter, but it doesn't mean you still can't have an encounter of some sort, a positive one. You have to be like, throw out the bathwater and the baby. If it doesn't mean exactly what if a text doesn't mean always the same thing, because that's the hermeneutical triangle. It doesn't, that's the point it's kind of making. It doesn't the encounter is different for every reader, okay? The text is encountered differently. And the text is already different once it leaves the author. It's not the same once it leaves the control of the author who's writing it. All right, move on. I have a little quotation here from something. What do I want to say about that? Do I want to say anything? No. Move on. So what is an encounter? It's a particular kind of meeting or experience between persons. Well, that doesn't say very much, does it? I'm reading my own work, Ms. Tran. You know, I'm the one who wrote this, Ms. Whatchamacallit, Ms. Crystal. An encounter. To find, basically. I mean, encontrar, if you took Spanish in school, means to find something. This comes to us from Anglo-French. Encontrer, which is based on the Latin preposition contra, to be opposite something or against something, contra. So, I'm leaning, it's contra murum, I'm leaning against the wall. But we most commonly use it, in a sense like political or, sense in that way. I'm contra this, I'm pro this, I'm con that, I'm against this view or I'm in favor of this view. That's not, all it just means is being, leaning against something like this, contra. So I guess an encounter. What are we going to do with this, Ms. Snyder? I don't know. Are the people leaning next to each other? Leaning into each other? I don't know. But that's the word. So how is an encounter different from a meeting? How do I distinguish it? Well, I just say it's a particular kind of meeting. Right, Ms. Taylor? And that's that's how I get around it. I add the word particular. But really, encounter and meeting can be the same thing. And I think they probably are the same thing. Meeting sacred writings, we could have called this course just as encountering sacred writing. Is there anything more deeper in an encounter? Yes, sir. Well, I mean, if you look at it in the sense of being opposite to something, contrary, Mr. Seraphin, to be contrary or contrarian has kind of a negative connotation, hostility even. If you're contra something, you're coming against somebody that doesn't usually have the sense of, I'm coming to meet you, at least not to meet you in a friendly way, right, Miss Casada? Miss Casada, I'm coming against you, bringing cake. Usually if I say I'm coming against you, you wouldn't probably assume, Mr. Wojciechowski, that it's a positive thing, It's a more of a hostile thing, You're meeting someone as an adversary. And adversus is another Latin word which means be towards against something. Be turned towards something as in against it. Okay, so an adversary, someone who's against you. And you're in conflict with that person. So, encounter could be used in a negative way of aggressiveness. It could have an aggressive meaning. An encounter. Not a positive one. And sometimes we see that in the religious writings. What am I going to do with you people? What am I going to do? Let's see, hopefully I can find it, but I forget exactly where it is. I'm hoping it's in the early chapters of Jeremiah. He complains against God, but might not be. Let's see. Sometimes I have to do a search. Just give me a moment here. Plot against the prayer of Jeremiah. Yes. Last warning. Great drought. Yes. Jeremiah's life is a warning. Oh, there's a happy guy. No, I think I'll have to search for it. All right, well. Oh, maybe this is it. Oh, yes, here it is. Jeremiah chapter 20. Yeah, not the catechism. So if you have your Bible, you can follow along with me. Bible is required for the course, right, Ms. McErlane? I required it today. Yeah. There she is. Thought so. I thought so, Miss Paul. I'll give you a moment. Miss Harrison, you got your Bible out, or I can't tell.
It's fine.
Oh, bins. Oh, that's good. God bless you, woman. Anyone got it? Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 7. Begin with verse 7. Prophet Jeremiah, chapter 20, beginning with verse 7. Let's see. Mr. Barnett, you got it?
Try to pull it up.
Huh?
I can try to pull it up.
You can try to pull it up. Okay, sir. Yes. Sir Lebedinsky. Do you have it? Actually.
Oh, I haven't tried to read.
You don't have to explain yourself to me. I'm just obsessive compulsive. I see objects in the room and I have to. Got it yet, Mr. Barnett? Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 7. Chapter 20, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You sleep me worried and I sleep. You were stronger than I. You were together. I ridiculed all day long. And
Keep going.
the prophet felt lured into.
Are you reading the section heading? Well, you read a little bit of it. Mr. Jastrzemski, can you read the rest?
No, I'm ready.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, thank you, Mr. Barnett. You did your bit. Hand it off to Mr. Jastrzemski, who's doesn't have it on his computer. Well, read it from Mr. Barnett's computer.
Mr. Barnett doesn't have it.
Oh, he doesn't? Uh-oh. We must have had it. You read something.
He's got that. That's what he.
Keep going.
Christians, I speak, I cry out, I cry balance in school because the Lord is giving
Oh, slow down and enunciate a little bit. Project. 'Cause I'm sorry, I can't understand.
For since I speak,
Spake.
okay. I cried out. I cried balance in school because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me. And it was risen daily. Because
Keep going, sir. All right, Wojciechowski. Continue it, please.
reading stuff.
Start with verse 9, sir.
Must be more of his needs, but his word was in my heart, as a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I was weary for forbearing, and I could not stay.
Okay, that's fine. We'll stop there. That's interesting. No, anyways, so here's kind of and it's not always a positive description of an encounter with God. In this case, we have a man named Jeremiah, who's a prophet, a speaker for God, kind of a mouthpiece for God, and not willingly, he's overwhelmed by the encounter. God kind of forces himself on him, and he even starts out by saying, "You seduced me, Lord." In other translations, you duped me or you fooled me. He accuses God of fooling him. But he let himself be fooled. I don't know what Jeremiah necessarily means by that. I don't know, he thought things would get better, but people actually don't want to listen to Jeremiah and they want to kill him. But you were too strong for me, so God overpowers him. Okay, so this is hostile language. This is not, positive language. See, in the encounter, God overpowers Jeremiah and makes him proclaim his message, apparently whether Jeremiah wants to or not. So people laugh at me and they make fun of me, but I have to yell out, violence and outrage I proclaim. But doing this, speaking the message of God, which you would think would be a good thing, has not benefited Jeremiah. People make fun of me. So I say I won't mention God anymore. This is verse 9. I will not mention him. I won't speak in the name of God. But then God's presence burns within him like a fire. It burns him, and he has to say something. He has to say something. He can't keep his mouth shut. God won't let him. So here's a negative Jeremiah chapter 20, verses 7 through 9. This is a more or less positive. It's not all, hey, happy relationship with God. Jeremiah doesn't want the message that God's giving him. He wants to stop this encounter with God, but God won't let it go. God is aggressive. Not that Jeremiah is his enemy, but it kind of feels that way sometimes, Oh, yes. Well, which one? There were two encounters. One popped into my head, but then another popped in. Hold on a second. It's about Moses, when Moses encounters God. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Okay, so I think I've gone too far because now we're into the laws. All right, so it must have been before that. All right, hold on a second. Before the plagues. Well, anyways, I can still tell you the story. I would just rather read it to you myself from the Bible. No, I can't find it. At least I'm missing it. Yeah, I'm missing it. All right, well, guess I could search for it, but... Okay. Let me just give me one more second, see if I can find it. Plague. All right, Passover ritual, departure from Egypt, but people are grumbling. Okay. Well, it's in the book of Exodus. I'm pretty sure it's in the book of Exodus. I wonder if it's in the book of... No, I don't think so. Anyways, there's an encounter between God and Moses. It's a very weird little story. This man Moses that God has called to liberate the Israelites from their oppression in the land of Egypt. Okay. And at some point, God And the story is just kind of stuck in. So, as I said, it's a very weird little story. Moses is traveling along with his wife, and God suddenly appears and tries to kill Moses. Tries to kill him. And they're wrestling, Moses is wrestling with the Lord on the ground and stuff like that. And so Moses' wife takes a piece of flint, which is a very sharp rock, almost as sharp as a razor, which people in the ancient world would use for cutting and stuff. And she goes and she grabs Moses' penis, pulls the foreskin and then cuts off the foreskin on his penis. So right on the spot, she circumcises him while he's apparently in a wrestling match, or God's got him around the throat and is trying to kill him. Not sure, Mr. McMaster, that if it were my wife doing that to me, I would be that appreciative. If I'm in the middle of, like a mixed martial arts fight in the octagon and my wife ran in with a knife or some scissors and snipped off my foreskin, not sure I would consider that a positive in this scene here. Not very helpful, do you think? That's what she does. Jochebed, I believe her name is. And she takes the foreskin and she touches it to Moses. He says, "You are now a spouse of blood to me. You are a husband of blood to me." Which, whatever she meant, your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea what Jochebed meant by that. Maybe now they're united by the blood. I don't know, Mr. McMaster. I have no clue. Oh, yeah. I might ask the Lord when I get up to heaven and say, hey, God, what was the whole thing with Jochebed cutting off Moses' wiener or something? Maybe you'll tell me. Or maybe I won't even care, No, I won't care, Miss Cobb. Because when I get up to the great pearly gates, my only question is going to be, Lord, where is the Indian buffet? Point me in the direction of the lodgings of the Tikka Masala and the Rasamai. That's all I care. And then if the Lord wants to explain why, Indian before saying, Well, I think biblical scholars think the story, as weird as it is stuck in there as a confirmation of the Jewish practice of circumcision. To show that, yes, even God values circumcision so much that he attacked Moses and tried to kill him because apparently Moses was not circumcised yet. And he was a Jew. You're supposed to circumcise your baby 8 days after birth. And that's in the law that God gave to Moses, but God gives that law to Moses later. So Moses wouldn't have known. None of the Jews had that law yet. Moses hadn't been to Mount Sinai yet. So how could God be angry that he wasn't following a law that no one knew about yet? Probably the story was really honest. The story is trying to show the importance of circumcision. This is what happened even to Moses because he wasn't circumcised. And so his wife immediately circumcises him and God's okay. God leaves him alone. An encounter! But it's violent. God is trying to kill Moses, the dude that he just said, I want you to go and liberate the Israelites. Oh, but wait a second, Mr. McMaster. Can I try to kill you first? Can I go a little John Wick on you? Kill you. I'll try to kill you first, Moses. And how is he going to liberate the Israelites if he's dead? Because the Lord choked him to death. The Jewish God is a funny God. Anyways. So it's a negative encounter. It is! When it's a negative encounter, you have another word for that, it's a confrontation. It's a confrontation. Confrontare. from medieval Latin, Middle Ages, no? Latin cum means with or together. Frons means frons frontis, front. Okay? So I guess to be at the front of something. Get in someone's face, because the front is the face as well. For the word front, frons can be used to refer to a person's face, because it's facing front. So you're getting in their face. But in medieval Latin, it had a sense of assigning limits to. All right. I don't know what to do with that, but that's just what it meant. That's how they used it to confront confrontare, was used in the sense of placing limits on something. So I'm meeting someone in a challenge. Well, God's not really challenging Moses in that story in Exodus, if I can ever find it. If someone wants a extra credit point, find that story for me about Moses and God trying to kill him in the circumcision thing. I'm almost certain it's in Exodus, but I couldn't find it in my Bible. So I'll give you an extra credit point if you can find it. But there's another confrontation. This is Isaac. I want Jacob. Okay, that's not what I want. Jacob. Okay. Jacob and Esau meet. Here we go. In the book of Genesis, this man Jacob, who's one of the ancestors of the Jews, has an encounter with God. A confrontation, because it's a challenge. Yes. What is it, sir?
Chapter 4, verse 1.
Thank you, sir. It's 24. Yeah. The Lord came upon Moses and sought to put him to death. Zipporah. I'm sorry, I said Jochebed. Zipporah. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay, so Genesis. So remember what he said. Exodus chapter 4. Genesis chapter 33. Here's a confrontation. In Exodus, it was an encounter, a violent encounter between God and Moses. In Genesis, another violent encounter between this ancestor of Moses named Jacob and he thinks it's a man, but it seems to turn out to be God again. Who would like to read that? Start chapter 33, starting with verse 23. 33:23. Who would like to read that? Miss Snyder. That's okay. You're fine. Genesis, the first book in the Bible, chapter 33, verse 23. I'll be quiet. Stop and Shop Pharmacy. Get out of here. There was some way to turn off these stupid messages. Okay. All right. Is Kelsey? You don't have it?
No.
Well, Ms. Mackerlane's got her Bible. How, Ms. Mackerlane, you got it? Not yet? No? Okay. Miss Taylor? Yes. Yes. Huh?
Verse 1.
There's no verse 23 in chapter 33 of the book of Genesis? Do you mind if I look to see? Okay, I'm just... Weird.
It's also
Verse 2.
Weird. All right, so maybe they put it into 34. It could be that the chapter, the chapters are different. All right, good. Try the next chapter and see. I don't know what's going on. That's weird. Let me check the Bible. Whoops. 32. Sorry. Chapter 32. Well, that's stupid. Well, I should have been more, because it says, don't worry about it. Anyway, 32 verse 23. Do you mind,
Dread sent them across the street, he said of all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that the hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the arm. I think that's with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it was daybreak."
keep going.
But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" Jacob, he answered. And the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God, and all humans have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." And he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel,
Peniel, yes, good.
saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and that my life was spared." The sun rose above him, and he passed through.
Penuel, right?
And he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon.
Excellent, okay. So here we again have God attacking someone, wrestling with this man Jacob. You know, Jacob's just out there in the wilderness with his family, and then a man appears and wrestles with Jacob all night until the break of dawn, as it says. So here we have a confrontation. There's a challenge. Can you beat me in the wrestling match? But apparently he could not prevail. Yes, the man saw that he could not beat Jacob in the challenge. A challenge is what? Calling into question someone's ability to do something. Okay, that's what a challenge is. Anglo-French, again, our old friend Anglo-French. Challengier, something that you can accuse someone of, a fault, a blemish. And it comes ultimately from the Latin calumnior, to be accused, or to accuse someone. So I'm accusing you. I'm saying you can't do something. Oh, yes, I can. Okay, then you answer my challenge. You're answering my challenge. I say you can't wrestle me and beat me and pin me. So that's the challenge apparently here. God wants to pin Jacob, but he can't. Well, that's interesting. Is there anything that God can't do? Well, apparently he's not that good of a wrestler. But anyways, maybe he's a good wrestler, but Jacob apparently was a better wrestler, but he couldn't pin him. So Jacob was meeting the challenge, so calling into question his ability. And he wants to know the name of this person that he wants to know the name of the person he's been wrestling. And you find out it's God later. It's not really a man. And God won't tell him his name. And that's how Jacob kind of figures out that, this must be God, because he won't allow me to know his identity. He's being secretive. But we also see in the story, Mr. McMaster, that God's a bad loser. Don't be God at darts, or do something, because what does he do? He hurts Jacob. He tears out his hip because he can't beat him. So God throws a little hissy fit. He doesn't shake his hand and say, "Okay, good match. I couldn't beat you." No, he cripples him. So God's a bad loser. So these ideas, I counter, confrontation, meeting a challenge. What does this have to do with sacred writings, or even writings in general? Well, reading can be a confrontation. You are confronting the author. In some cases, you're confronting the author as a challenge. You are wrestling sometimes with things that the author is laying down. So I can, for me personally, I mean, I like to read, but sometimes I can find it so difficult because the authors, sometimes I don't agree with them, or they write things that, that trouble me, disturb me. And I wrestle with it, and I don't like the feeling. So, or it sets my mind off in a million different directions. But there's a confrontation there. I'm confronting the author's agenda, her perspective, her message, and it forces a decision. Like, what does this mean? What does this story mean? What does this weird story of God wrestling Jacob mean? What does this story about God trying to kill Moses mean? God forcing Jeremiah to proclaim his message. What does it mean? It's confronting me. I'm meeting something about God, and maybe I don't like what I'm meeting, Ms. Prawl. Maybe I don't like God's a sore loser. That's kind of, I really expect that about God. God gets so angry if someone doesn't do what he wants, he tries to kill the person. It doesn't sound like the merciful God I'd like him to be. I'm confronted with it, though. Can't get it out of my head. I could remove it from the Bible if I wanted to, I guess. That would make it easier so no one could read it anymore. Cover it up. God can sometimes force me to do things I don't want to do. What might God want me to do? It depends on what God wants me to do. So there's a confrontation, it's forcing a decision. But it also can be confronting in the sense of, asking questions like, are you going to act like this? Because there's a lot of violence in the Bible. Just to talk about religious writings, there's violence in religious writings. In the case of the Bible, people have problems with it because I don't know why. It's what people do. I mean, we're human beings. We kill each other. All right? We're violent to each other. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that it would appear in the Bible. And sometimes it's just recording what people did. And sometimes I think it's trying to get the reader to ask the question, are you going to act like this? Or do you believe this? Do you really believe this? Would you do this? Or will you stop doing this? Like I mentioned slavery before. Well, everyone does it. Every culture has had slavery in some way, shape, or form. Okay, fine. So God gives you some laws put some boundaries around it. Okay, this is how you have to treat your slaves and stuff like this. They're not great laws, but this is thousands of years ago. But will you stop doing this? Because ideally you were enslaved once yourselves. So read between the lines here, people. You were slaves in Egypt. Should you own slaves if it was done to you? Should you stop doing this, maybe? So it's confronting. It's trying to get me to think, I think. And ultimately, in the case of the Bible, which is an encounter with, well, I guess I'll get to this. It's will you trust in God alone? I'll come back to this on Thursday. But, all right. God bless you all. I'll see you on Thursday. Let's see here. Have a good day.
Yes, sir.